Good morning, everyone. Almost afternoon. I'm going to interrupt your lunch so that we can start today's event. I want to welcome you all to the Dean's Spring Student Colloquium. This is a fantastic event that we have every spring that allows us to showcase our remarkable student scholars and researchers that we have in our departments. And so you can see from the agenda, we have 5 remarkable young students here today that will be presenting. Before we get going, though, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge a few people. I first want to acknowledge Dr. Shashir Mather, our Associate Dean of Research. Shashir is the person who organized all this, and unfortunately he has to leave and go to a meeting, so I get to step to the mic and take credit for everything. So, by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm Ron Rogers. I'm the Associate Dean for the College of Social Sciences as well. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize the students and the staff from the Dean's office who've worked hard to make the lunch and the room and everything available today. So if you could give a round of applause to everyone that helped with that. So finally, to start this morning's event, I want to call to the podium the Dean of our college, Dr. Walter Jacobs.
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 3rd annual Student Research Scholarly and Creative Activity, RISCA, Student Symposium. This is the 3rd annual one, and Dr. Shashir Mather is organizing for the 2nd year in a row. Ruma Chopra organized the first one. Ron actually took 2 of my 3 thank yous that I wanted to do, so I'm going to do them anyway. So thank you again to Shashir for organizing this event. Thank you to Venetia Johnson and the students for organizing the lunch. Let's give them one more round of applause. My last thank you is to the San Jose State University Office of Research. So this is the office that actually provides the funding to the college that enables us to support the faculty in their RISCA activities and also to support the students who the faculty work with. So I want to definitely also give a thank you to Pam, who is the AVP, right? AVP of research. So she's going to come up in just a minute. So let's give her and her office a thank you. So one of the fun things about being the dean is I get to go to a lot of meetings, a lot of events. My favorite events are always the award ceremonies, the ceremonies where we have students present their research. College of Social Sciences, wonderful place. Love working with our students. They're so talented, so much going on. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing about all the wonderful projects we have lined up today, and looking forward to these students going on to graduate school and eventually becoming the professors of tomorrow. So students who are presenting today, 10, 15 years down the road, I'll probably see you up here presenting at the faculty RISCA symposium. So with that, though, let me introduce Pam, who's our Associate Vice President of the Office of Research. So she's going to say a few words.
It's always tough to follow Dean Jacobs. He's a lot taller. But we share very similar sentiments, and that is the importance of students and faculty working together on research, scholarship, and creative activities. The genuine enthusiasm that exists in this college in all 3 of those areas. It's a really both eclectic and interesting mix. And one of the things that's really wonderful about this is that you get to step outside of your own discipline and hear student researchers present from their perspectives and see how it integrates with the work that you've been doing. As Dean Jacobs said, many of you will be thinking about graduate school, and we hope you will also be thinking about becoming professors of the future, because the fact that you've been so engaged in your intellectual engagement to this point means that you can encourage and help others succeed. One of the things for the future is you get your discipline grasp, but we also look for that interdisciplinary kind of approach. And so learning from others and finding out what are the important issues that other fields are doing can give you some ideas about how your work can integrate with theirs and push the boundaries forward. Sometimes you can make a lot more impact in those interface areas because something that may be very well known in your field is a completely new idea or approach. And so this is a wonderful incubator for a lot of both celebration of people's accomplishments, but also we hope a seed for further work that you'll be considering. And my deep apologies. What I really love doing is actually listening because this is how I get fed in my soul. But I'm going with Shashir Mathur. The good news is that we're giving out money to faculty who are continuing to figure out how to, through their research, scholarship, and creative activity proposals, they get evaluated, and many of them from your college will get funding, and that will help keep the research going in your college. But we actually have to go and evaluate them. So my apologies that I won't be here to listen to the presenters. I did get to hear one who had presented at the student research competition. And for those of you who may still be at San Jose State next year, I want you to consider the work that you're doing and whether or not it might be something that you can put forward next year at the student research competition. And I'm sure your college will continue to tell you as those deadlines approach. So good luck to all of you and keep the intellectual engagement going. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stacks. So 2 more things. I call her Pam. Pam's always Pam to me. But for students, if you see folks around campus that you don't know very well, of course you want to be very formal. So if you see Dr. Stacks on campus, say hello and thank her again for her office's support. Second thing, quickly, is for students who are in the back, there's plenty of space up in front. Don't be shy. There's some table space, so come on up here. These 2 tables in the middle. Don't be shy. Come on up. So with that, let me turn it back over to Associate Dean Ron Rogers.
We're not going to move until people come up and take those seats. No pressure. All right, so why don't we get started? Our first presenter today is Jacob Delgado from the Department of Economics. Go Economics. And Jacob's presentation is entitled Santa Cruz Visitor Restrooms Program Analysis, Game Theory, Cost-Benefit Analysis, and the Free Rider Problem. So please join me in welcoming Jacob to the podium.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me here. My name is Jacob, Department of Economics, and I'm going to start us off all today with a talk on the Santa Cruz Visitor Restroom Program. First, I want to give you all a little bit of a background. The city of Santa Cruz, like a lot of downtown areas, has a lot of tourist traffic and locals who shop there. As a result, and I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of downtown areas, there's a demand for restrooms that hasn't been met by the city. So the city responded by opening a visitor restroom program which offers a subsidy to businesses in exchange for them to open up their restrooms to the public, which sounds like a good idea. And this program went ahead and prompted the research question of what economic factors are at play here, and what can we do to mitigate those factors, because we all do like actionable decisions, right? So a little bit more detail on the program. It's a $400 subsidy. So in exchange for that $400, I, the business, agree to basically open up my restrooms to the public. There's a sign that the city gives me that I put up so everyone knows it's there. And then I'm gonna agree for the city to come in, make sure everything's on the up and up, I'm keeping everything clean and letting people in. The geography of this could be seen here, and it's generally the downtown area of Santa Cruz. So those restrooms in blue are basically already existed by the city, and then the visitor restroom program added a couple of orange ones. Unfortunately, as time went by, we see that some of them dropped out, leaving Bookshop Santa Cruz, which was already open before the subsidy was offered, right? So it's less than ideal. The question is, why didn't that work? The first basic economic reaction is, well, $400 isn't enough, right? And we go to a cost-benefit analysis to figure that out. The idea here is we determine how much does it cost for people to use a restroom downtown above what the businesses provide, how would that apply to business, and when it makes sense for a business to participate or receive a positive benefit, right? So on our cost assumptions, fixed costs are going to be ignored, and we're going to assume all restrooms locations are created equal. Some may be further from downtown, some might be closer, but they're all going to hover around an average. And lastly, we're going to assume that businesses have a labor advantage. They don't need full-time people cleaning the restrooms like the city does, right? On the benefit side, there are benefits in the cost-benefit analysis. We only assume the $400 subsidy. This is a conservative estimate because we assume that research does say that people prefer cleaner environments, so there is a revenue increase, but we want to stay conservative as possible. So jumping into this, the basic city, and it looks like an image dropped off there, but the city goes ahead and offers and gathers costs for all of this stuff. Now, for labor, we're basically assuming because they have the advantage, they're already cleaning the restrooms, they only have to do the additional cleaning, that cost is going to be reduced. They won't have to pay for the potties the city does, leaving them with consumable and maintenance costs. So that cost is basically the cost incurred by the business of letting people use their restrooms. Now, jumping in here, I don't want you to get blinded by the numbers because it's actually really simple. And what we see here is the more people who participate, the cheaper it is per restroom to do this. And we also note that we don't really see a positive solution for the businesses until about 23 participants, which is kind of a lot. You could argue the assumptions there, and it might happen more or less, but the general takeaway are these levers, and that's we could reduce costs, we could increase the subsidy, or we could get more people participating, which is moving very, very quickly, as you can see how quickly that divides that total cost of people using the restroom downtown, right? So that segues us to game theory, which is the idea that I as a business basically go and to make the best action based off the expected actions of others. So will I participate is actually easy questions. For some businesses, it doesn't make sense to open the restroom for the public, right? So what they end up doing is just not participating at all. The more interesting question is when I should participate. And when I should participate could be illustrated here. So how this reads is these are probability curves for 3 businesses, right? And we basically see that they won't participate until they pretty much expect a positive cost-benefit analysis. So the idea here is that's going to happen at different times, and the even higher overarching theme is the decision is even if I'm business 3, even if business 1 and business 2 are completely illogical, that does not change my decision to open up. So the idea is don't open, don't open, don't open, open, right when I get that probability. This starts to create a theme, which is the more participants, the higher the probability of success here, right? Now, here's the problem. In a perfect world, we would pay an analyst to come in, estimate this stuff, and really figure out how many participants we need. That's very expensive, so we're operating with imperfect information. We only want to put so much in if we're offering a $400 subsidy, right? So the solution there is to pretty much get as many people as possible right when you open, or being that we're already open, to get as many people as possible on your next wave of launch when we go ahead and get more people in there, right? So the last economic concept we want to touch on here is public goods and the free rider problem. So the free rider problem happens whenever something is non-excludable and non-rivalrous, right? So businesses they're contractually obligated to let people in by accepting the subsidy, non-excludable. And there's multiple people for the same restroom. Your use doesn't affect mine, other than I might have to wait in line or something, right? So the effect of the free rider problem is overuse. Now that you have restrooms downtown, you don't have to go ahead and wait for basically to hold it till you go home. You could use them for other services like cleaning up before some event, etc., etc. And we see these evidence of overuse in the news, right? So these are from Santa Cruz local newspapers, and you see evidence of major vandalism. You see porta potties companies deciding not to loan porta potties to the city because they're afraid of vandalism. And over a call a day to the Santa Cruz police station, which is a non-trivial number, right? Furthermore, what could be compounding this problem is basically the homeless and tourist population. So Santa Cruz is 8th of regions in size for basically chronically homeless, and we have large unaccompanied homeless youth, right? So that means that there is a segment of this population where public restrooms are pretty much their only wash facilities. Similarly, there's a lot of tourists generating over $700 million a year, meaning that there's a lot of people taking day trips to Santa Cruz who only have those restrooms as facilities, which will again lead to overuse, right? So in conclusion, what all of this means is there's a couple of ways we could approach this. We could reduce costs, we could increase the subsidy, changing the benefit structure. We could do collusion to basically get everyone to coordinate to overcome the game theory problem. And we could offer alternatives for homeless and basically tourists, right? Now, the answer is probably some combination of all of those, but there's a much larger theme here. And the theme is whenever you open up some sort of public good program like this, there's going to be very predictable fundamental economic consequences every time. The hope is that research of this kind could basically give people a little more information before committing to these types of decisions. So that wraps me up, and again, thank you for being here, or thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jacob. So I forgot to mention, I know you all will have lots of questions after each of these presentations, but we're holding our questions until the end, and then we've left a period where the students are going to be sitting up here as a panel, and then you can fire as many questions at them that you want. So write your questions down. I could tell Veronica was excited about that prospect. Okay, so our next speaker is Veronica Haro from Mexican American Studies. Veronica's title of her talk today is The Dance Between Culture and Systems in Culturally Relevant Pedagogy, Centering Student Voice and Experience in an Innovative Model of Urban Schooling. Please join me in welcoming Veronica to the podium.
I like to use my hands. So hello, yes, my name is Veronica Haro, and my project is titled The Dance Between Culture and Systems in Culturally Relevant Pedagogy, Centering Student Voice and Experience in an Innovative Model of Schooling. So a little bit of the school context. So I also work at the school that I did my research at, and so they have what's called a just right learning model. And so what that means is that students learn their literacy and their math at their just right learning. So whatever they're academically efficient at, is what they're going to be learning at. So if you are a 6th grader, but you are efficient in learning at a 7th grade level, then you'll be put in that module. Same if you're at a literacy level that's at a 7th grade module, then and you're a 6th grader, you'll be put up to that module. And so this has shown accelerated growth. It's an inner city charter school located in the East Bay. It's the 2nd year of the school, so that's why it's
so important to do this work, because these are the foundational years of the school as it then progresses out to a high school. It's predominantly low income and African American and Latino student population, and all of the core teachers are white. Let's see, maybe. The research question that I was working with are, what are the reasons for the school's negative school climate? So what I was seeing was academic disengagement, negative peer interactions, and behavioral resistance. Some of the key concepts that I was working with was culturally relevant pedagogy, and that's a method of teaching where teachers integrate in students' prior knowledge and culture, where they stretch students with care to deconstruct and construct knowledge, and where they meet students' academic needs in order to demand a high level of academic rigor. For the students, that means that they must experience a high level of academic success. It must develop and maintain their cultural competence, and it must develop their critical consciousness so that they can challenge the status quo. I was also looking at cariño, or authentic caring, so the way in which we interact with students, the relationship with students. So the cooperation, collaboration, and reciprocity. So we're co-developing the class with the students. So it's not about that, oh, the students don't care about the curriculum. And this is flipping it on its head and saying, when the students feel cared for, when they see themselves reflected in the content and in the curriculum, they'll then produce a high academic rigor. And culturally appropriate management strategies. So teachers need to make sure they're monitoring their behavioral strategies so that there's equitable treatment regardless of racial background of their students, which is assessing their own cultural biases or racial biases, so it's a continual process. Questioning their assumptions of what works. So what works for one teacher in one classroom may not work in another classroom. What works for one teacher with one group of students may not work for the other group of students, so it's being responsive to who's right in front of you. And mutual accommodations. There are some things that students are just going to have to learn to do. So that's showing up to class on time and turning in their assignments. But that doesn't mean that you can't support the students in advocating for their needs. So that's the mutual accommodation part of it. So I use the method of photo voice, and I really love this. It comes from 3 theoretical frameworks. So it comes from Paulo Freire's problem-posing education or empowerment education to develop critical consciousness, feminist theory, and documentary photography. And what this does is just gives the camera to those underrepresented communities and allows them to represent their assets and their needs and present that to the stakeholders so that they get to be co-developers in change for their community versus that change just happening at them. This is a breakdown of the photo voice group that I used, and for the survey, just to balance out that data, I had 35 out of 102 students do that, and it was more of a choice basis if they wanted to. My ethical framework is based off of Wilson's relational accountability, and that's respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, so we're doing this together with my students, and also the Mayan teachings of Inlakesh, so that balance of power, that we're together in this. So bringing together the teachings of the students, these are some of the findings. So they felt that teachers were just too busy for the students, even though they were demanding a high level of academic rigor. And what's interesting about this picture is that the teacher is on the phone, on her computer, in front of the student taking the picture. And this isn't even the student's teacher, but what's interesting is the student felt like this really captured what she was trying to get across, of that teachers have so much to do that they're missing what's right in front of them, and so that relationship isn't being built, and so students don't feel seen and don't feel heard. And they say that's mostly when the behavioral stuff starts to happen, or they don't understand something, and so that's when behavioral stuff starts to happen in the class. They're saying that the just right learning, it's too fast. So our math classes are 40 minutes long, and by the time students sit down and when they're asked to leave, it's maybe 30 minutes, and so there's so much asked of them, but they just want teachers and the model to slow down. Lacking culturally appropriate management strategies. So we have, when students are struggling in class, they're asked to step outside and take a tab or take a break, and students feel like this is not helpful, because they're already amped up and they feel like this is them just getting in more trouble and it's not meeting them and serving their needs. And on the flip side of that, the students say that there is buy-in to learning at their just right level. They feel a sense of agency in that. In the last student-led conferences that we just had at the end of third quarter, students made a year growth in 3 quarters, or some students made 2 years growth. So it is working, we just need to balance that because it's going too fast and burning students out. So bringing together the students' teachings, also with the key terms or key concepts, I developed a concha of critical reflection. And so for the Aztec or for the Mexica people, the concha calls in the ancestors and asks them for the support so that we can walk in this way in a good way. And so in the center of that, there is that in Lakesh that we are doing this with students, not at students. So culturally relevant pedagogy at the core of it, the critical reflection of teachers, that ongoing process of just assessing where I'm at, are my racial biases coming into play? That relationship, that cariño, that trust between student and teacher, assessing our school systems, are they culturally responsive? Assessing our content, instruction, and assessment, is that culturally responsive? Assessing our management strategies, is that culturally appropriate? And all throughout that, and what I've seen at this school and at the other school, another school that I've worked at, it's happened through surveys, but students are constantly giving us this feedback. So that's why you have that student feedback. If it's through positivity, that's great. A lot of times it's through behavioral resistance. And so if we constantly are assessing that, we're always getting that. So we don't have to wait till the end of the year. So building that out, this is the potential outcomes that I think. If you allow students to be part of this process, there's a healing. Because most of the time, especially, so this is with middle school students, they're not allowed to be a part of the development process, and this can be a healing time for them. And this can develop a sense of belonging at school and strengthen our community, which is what we're struggling with. And so the potential outcomes of that, as they feel a sense of belonging on this campus, can support academic identity and academic proficiency. So the next steps, starting this Friday, we're actually going to start affinity groups with our students. So a Latino affinity group and an African American affinity group. And our students don't feel seen. And so that's to allow that space just to process and to be with a staff member that is Latino or African American, seeing as though all of our core teachers are white. They need that space. Our math classes have been extended to now be 50 minutes. There's also intervention after class so that we can slow things down. The model is being reassessed, trying to make sure we keep the good things, but kind of filter out what's not working, because there is teacher burnout and there's also student burnout. And this is an ongoing process, right? It's a second year, but I feel if we continue to push in student voice and actually listen and see through their eyes, this can be a real powerful opportunity to uplift the potential, the full potential of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So our next speaker is Angela Iraheta from Mexican American Studies as well. And Angela is going to be giving a presentation entitled Reimagining Systems of Information and Collective Knowledge in the Latina Community, Analyzing the Use of Podcast as Dynamic Forms of Collective Knowledge Production. So please join me in welcoming Angela to the microphone.
Good evening, everybody. So this is going to be my presentation. It was a project that I worked on for my capstone course in MOS 240. So to begin with, these are my guiding questions that I use throughout my research. So how are podcasts using the medium to create new forms of knowledge production? What is the impact of podcasts on longtime listeners? And what are areas of the Latina experience that still need to be explored within podcasts? So just to give a brief definition, podcasts are an audio blog accessible through various forms of media and the internet, including SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, NPR, and then separate online blogs as well. So what I'm trying to contest with my research is that podcasts are creating new knowledge by using both conversational and community knowledge, and kind of reimagining what it means to be a Latina, because there's a big misconception of what Latinas do and what they embark. So the methods that I use it's two parts. So it's methods, it will be the surveys, and then I did community conversations as well. So the surveys, I got 94 responses, and some of the questions that I asked during that research is, what kind of podcast do you listen to? what are topics that you are interested in, and what is something that you would still like to be explored. And from these surveys, I received people's information that wanted to continue having these conversations about podcasts, and that's where I got my conversational people, which are called co-thinkers, which are just members of the Latina community that really helped me elaborate on these ideas and think through them and develop new ways in which we can use podcasts to create new systems of knowledge and collective knowledge. And they were conducted via phone, FaceTime, and via emails as well. My conceptual framework for my project include community cultural wealth, Nepantla, and pedagogies of the home. And through each of these concepts, I looked at these conversations that I had with my thought partners, and I looked at the responses from the online surveys as well, and tried to find common themes and kind of analyze really what is needed in the community that isn't out there already, and how are podcasts doing that. So with community cultural wealth, it is trying to challenge the deficit model of thinking, especially within communities of color. And it comes in 6 different forms, which are presented by Yoso, which are aspirational, navigational, linguistic, familial, and resistant. And so I'm going to share 2 examples that share some of those forms of community cultural wealth. And these strengths, and they're already found in our community, but this concept helps us identify these concepts. So this is from my online survey, and this is a quote from one of their responses, and they're talking about Locatora Radio, which is 2 Chicanx females that run the podcast, and they talk about different topics such as sexuality, identity, the workplace, different things like that. So they're commenting to how they really think it creates community and made a space for open dialogue that discusses our realities and experiences. So really emphasizing on the fact that as Latinas, I think we use conversation and being in community as a way of resistance and a way of having space to navigate and cope through the different variety of things that we go through. The following is also from an online survey where they talked about Radio Ambulante, which is also a Latinx-driven podcast. They are sponsored by NPR, so they share several Latina and Latino stories from all around America and Latin America. So they talk about how the Spanish stories make them feel like they're experiencing current histories. So by reliving those different experiences, really accounting for our history and making it known what our experience have been, whether it's been immigration, schooling, work, all those types of things really reflect how we're really resistant in sometimes a society that doesn't necessarily support us in the ways that we need. The following concept is Nepantla, and this is a space of in-between. It is brought by Ansaldúa. It brings the different realities that Latinas often have to face. Whether it's code switching, navigating through school, work, different spaces where the code switching and being in that in-between space where you're unsure if you belong there or not. It really helps to identify that middle space and that middle ground. And this is also talking about Locatora Radio, and it's from an online survey. So they really talked about this space being able to discuss brown woman empowerment, different forms of resistant womanism, gender experiences, and sexuality. So again, that in-between space of having to balance all these different identities while still being cohesive and really having that same, being able to grasp still your identity while having to code switch and navigate through various spaces. And then this is from my co-thinker, Jenny. So she was one of the participants who I found through the online survey who wanted to do further conversations about podcasts. And this is something that she still needs to hear from podcasts. So she says, I would love to hear the struggles of navigating in academia, especially how hard it is dealing with family, life, work, and school, and hearing these struggles, I would want to hear the true uncensored struggles of women of color. So really it attests to what is not out there and what is not portrayed in the media. It's definitely something that still needs to be explored further and needs to be addressed. So the following is the last concept that I looked at, which is pedagogies of the home, which are skills and knowledge that are often learned in the home and taken and used in outside spaces such as school, work. So this is from my co-thinker, Katie. She also speaks about Radio Ambulante, and she says, it's like I'm home again in the kitchen talking over coffee. I miss being with my family, and it makes me feel closer to them. So at this point, she was talking to me about listening to the stories in Spanish and how listening to other people talk in Spanish was really a way of feeling connected to her home and to her culture when she was in a predominantly white space and she didn't have that space to speak Spanish, and how that really made her feel connected and really empowered to just continue on her journey. So back to my overall insights and guiding questions, to kind of do an overall wrap up of what my insights were from this research. It really shows how Latinas are often in this in-between space and it's not talked about. And through podcasts, it's been a way that personally I have found that it is a way of discussing the different issues that are going on within our lives, and also discussing current events and how, everything's all related. And from my co-thinkers and from my surveys, I think I got a lot of insights about just how much it's important to find yourself and be able to see somebody like you in places of power. Find role models that look like you, that you can imagine yourself being in. And I think through my conversations, I learned that through these podcasts, they really felt connected, even though it was just an online, through an online medium. It was really a space and a community where they felt open and they could connect with other people, even if it wasn't through, a physical space. So this is the conclusion. I'm still continuing this research now as I'm finishing up my grad program. So it is developing, and I'm trying to find new ways on how to use podcasts in an academic setting as a form of mentorship, and make it accessible when perhaps somebody can't always find somebody to be their mentor, but a podcast can be accessible for them anytime they need it. So that's the continuing research that I'm still working on. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Jamie Marie Pilar from Communication Studies. And the title of Jamie's talk is The Case of Snapchat. How and why do young adults use this? Now, I'd really like to know this, having two teenage sons.
Because I am short. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's such a nice crowd. My name is Jamie Pilar, and I am proud to represent the Communication Studies Department. I am a graduating senior, and this is one of my research topics. So technology in the form of social media has been a ubiquitous means of communication, which is manifested appreciably, not just for people, but especially by young adults and millennials. And throughout this presentation, I'll be talking about what is Snapchat, how is it different from other social media methods, other social media applications, the research methods that I used, and the findings that I had. So what is Snapchat? Snapchat is a social media communication networking application created by Evan Spiegel and Reggie Brown in 2011. It allows its users to send and capture so-called snaps, which are photos and videos, within a certain time limit from 1 to 10 seconds, or with no time limit at all, depending on the sender. And the prime feature about Snapchat that makes it very unique from other social media applications is that the photos and videos self-destruct or are automatically deleted after 24 hours. So this makes it an ephemeral app, which means that there's no record of anything after 24 hours, unless, of course, you save it on your own personal device. And the one way in which Snapchat is different from other social media applications like Facebook or Instagram is that there is no public feed where all of your friends see your post. So it's more private in a way that you avoid the drama between the social and political debates that happen in the infamous comments section. So it's quite liberating not having that on Snapchat. And lastly, Snapchat boasts features such as stickers, filters, geotags, and streaks, which is a very important aspect which I will discuss later on. And here are just a few filters that Snapchat offers. As you can tell, Kylie Jenner is in a lot of these because she's dubbed as the Snapchat queen, which is another discussion for another presentation. But as long as you have an eyes, a nose, and a face, the filters will work on you. So you can see dogs, cats, and the last photo on the left side is called the face swap. I've seen some very funny or very disturbing photos sometimes. So let's talk about some Snapchat statistics. So there are about 7.4 billion people in the world. Of course, not all of them are on Snapchat, but there are 158 million people who use Snapchat on a daily basis. And from those people, Snapchat, there are 10 billion videos every day that are being watched on the platform. Of that population, 60% use Snapchat to communicate with their friends and to chat with them. And with a 72% adoption rate, Snapchat has become the most widely used application amongst young adults or millennials, which is why I chose this research project to study on young adults or millennials. So some of you might be thinking, of all the research projects out there, why did I choose Snapchat? The reason why I chose to study Snapchat, there are various reasons, but particularly I want to know why I am drawn to this app when I've tried so hard to resist the hype. A lot of my friends keep telling me, pressuring me, why are you not on Snapchat yet when everyone else is on Snapchat? So I caved in. I joined Snapchat in late 2015, and I am kind of addicted to it now. So I decided to study why do young adults use Snapchat to communicate? So based on my own personal experience and with the observations that I had from my friends using Snapchat, I hypothesized that Snapchat has emerged as a more personal way to communicate that closely replicates the personal feel of face-to-face communication without the judgments and a curated effort to appear desirable on social media. Okay. For the purpose of this research, I used 1 quantitative and 2 qualitative research methods, namely surveys, interviews, and focus groups. And I used the convenience sampling method for all of these, and that I studied the age group between 18 to 30, or young adults or millennials, because they're the ones who use Snapchat the most on a regular basis. So let's dive in. Clicker. Okay. For the surveys. From disseminating surveys, I received 51 responses over the course of 3 weeks. And I wanted to know how often people use Snapchat and why did they choose to use Snapchat instead of other social media apps. I found that, having a hard time, okay. So one of the factors that influence young adults' usage of Snapchat is that it is fast and easy. It allows a fun customization of messages, and that it is also very convenient. Furthermore, another question I asked is, how would you describe Snapchat in a word? So from the long list of descriptions that I have provided, a majority noted that Snapchat is a form of an in-the-moment communication with 70%. It's fun, trendy, and cool because that's all what millennials are about, and that it's convenient. However, I'm going to say that it's not as intimate, with only 6% saying that it is, because it is a contradiction to my initial assumption that Snapchat was more intimate. And lastly, for the surveys, I asked them, what do you use Snapchat for the most? What are people doing on Snapchat? While most of my participants responded that they use Snapchat for entertainment purposes and obtaining information about what their friends are up to, a majority noted that they use it as a way to maintain relationships, and by that they are using streaks. So what is a streak? A streak is an indication that you and your friend have continually sent each other a snap or a photo video within 24 hours for more than one consecutive day. And if you ever wonder why 3 billion snaps are shared every single day, this is one of the reasons why. So the numbers on the side that you see indicates the number of days that each of these people are sending snaps to their friends. And they are also characterized with certain emojis to gamify this feature, so it's more fun when you see those numbers rise. For interviews, I wanted to ask why did they join Snapchat in the first place, and and for them to take me through their process of choosing to use Snapchat over other communication methods. So I found that young adults are more motivated by convenient and efficient communication, and by these sentiments from my interviewees, they said that it's easier than Facebook because it's fast, and that it's very easy to talk to people on Snapchat. Furthermore, a Snapchat feature has been lauded by several people is the ability to notify you when someone has read, opened, screenshotted, or replayed your snaps. So it seems like a lot of people want to know who is reading their snaps, who is opening them and not responding, which provided some problems for people who sent snaps like, why didn't you respond to snap? I saw that you opened it at 3:02 p.m. And on the aspect of intimacy, I noted that only 6% of the survey respondents said that it was intimate. But I found that some people didn't see Snapchat as intimate because you don't really necessarily have to be good friends in order to be Snapchat friends. However, a very interesting discovery that I found was that a highly intimate feature that Snapchat has is the streaks. So people said that streaks was a way for them to preserve and maintain relationships. And a really interesting discovery that I found was some admitted to still sending streak posts when they're not even in good terms with that person in real life. So it tells me that some people prioritize keeping that number and making sure it doesn't go to waste for that 500, 600 streak posts than actually fixing the issues they have with that person in real life. For focus groups, I wanted to explore deeper the motivations behind people using Snapchat. And I found that Snapchat brings the selfie game to a whole new level with all the filters that they offer. So these are the sentiments that manifest this statement that you can make yourself look cute even when you don't even feel cute on that day. And that you can see yourself transform because you can look like a dog or a penguin or whatever cute thing. And the data that supports my hypotheses the most is that Snapchat is an in-the-moment application, which means that you only share your interesting things that happen in your life or boring stuff with someone that you care about, because you know they won't mind. And since stores expire after 24 hours, Snapchat was deemed to be to have posts that are real time, that is authentic, genuine, and it just describes what people are up to now. So here are just a few other sentiments from my focus groups and interviews that describe what Snapchat is in their life. So you can see that it's real time, it's raw, it's living, it's going on, what's going on in my life right now, it's the highlight of my day, and the last part, it's more daily, and Instagram is for more social special events. The last part of my hypothesis about Snapchat having less pressure of being desirable online is manifested and summarized by this one statement from my interview. This person said that you don't have to get the perfect angle or the perfect caption or even the perfect filter. You can just post whatever you want as you see it in real life as it is happening right now. So if I had my phone right now, I would have Snapchatted this, but that would be not professional. In conclusion, Snapchat emerged as one of the fastest, easiest, and most convenient ways for young adults to communicate. It is not entirely as intimate as I had thought it would, but some people will find it intimate depending on how you use it. For example, the streaks were part of a relationship maintenance where the higher the number, I guess, the more intimate you are with that person, or you just like to have that 600 streak post going on. And lastly, it is an in-the-moment method of communication that tells people this is what I'm doing right now and this is my life. Thank you very much for listening.
So it's hard to believe we're to our last speaker today already. So our last speaker is Jeffrey Singh from the Department of Economics. His title of his talk is Radiology Resident Selection and Performance Prediction. Can we do better? Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey to the microphone.
So good afternoon. Again, my name is Jeff Singh, and I'm a part-time master's degree student in the economics department. And for the other part of my life, I work in a radiology department at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, which is a public teaching hospital just down the road from here. And today I'd like to share with you a problem in our hospital where I've been able to use some of the tools I've learned in my economics classes to try and help solve. And that problem is, how do we select radiology residents that come to train in our hospital, and how can we predict how well they will do based on the application to our program? Can we do better? So at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center, we train medical school graduates who want to become radiologists, and they come and spend 4 years as residents in our hospital, and they learn to read things like x-rays, ultrasound, CT scans, MRI scans, and PET scans. So how do we select the residents? There's a selection committee, and this committee has to screen about 300 applicants. Then from that pool, they invite about 100 of the students to interview. After the interview, the committee has to numerically rank all of these applicants from best to worst, say 1 to 100. And this list is fed into a computer along with all the other programs in the country and the rankings of all the students where they want to train. And the program tries to match up the students and the programs with their top choices. So it's very important that we get this ranking correct. So my first research question was, how do we actually rank these medical students so that we will potentially get the best residents? So this is a slide showing the typical data that comes with an applicant that the committee has to consider. And I'd like you to focus on the medical school data and then the interview data, because a recent meta-analysis found that these 6 selection factors in bold were correlated with resident performance and could potentially be used to predict their performance. And they are USMLE, which stands for United States Medical Licensing Examination, which is a standardized test to test medical knowledge, the rank of their medical school, whether they belong to the AOA Honor Society, their grades or whether they got honors, and the dean's letter, which is basically a summary of their entire medical school records, like their transcript, and finally their interview with us. So for my project, I used regression analysis to try and determine these factors that would predict resident performance. And so we looked at 59 residents that graduated from our program from 2002 to 2015 consecutively, and we had 2 senior faculty members rate each resident from top to bottom, so from 1 to 59. And then I applied the regression analysis to see if I could predict the resident performance. And that was compared to how the committee actually ranked them after they interviewed. And this is to see who did better, the committee, which are the human side, or the computer side, the regression analysis. So here are the results. So first I did simple bivariate regression, which just calculates a correlation coefficient R. And you can see the first 5 factors had correlations roughly 0.2, 0.3. And the interview, surprisingly, had not a very good correlation. It was actually very small and not significant. And these results were pretty similar to the meta-analysis I mentioned before by Kenny et al., showing correlations around 0.2 to 0.3. So the next thing I did was to use multiple regression, which tries to analyze several of the variables together to try and produce a better predictive model. So this column shows the results from the best predictive model, and you can see the beta coefficients, which are somewhat analogous to the correlation coefficients because they're sort of standardized or normalized. You can see that they're about 0.3. And you can also notice that the best model did not include honors or the deans there because it turns out whether you're in the honor society, whether you get honors or your overall evaluation, they're all very highly correlated. So the best model does not need all three variables. So in this case, it just needed whether they were an honor society member. And then finally, notice that the interview score was essentially 0. Now, there's an overall summary statistics for multiple regression, which is called an R-squared, and it's adjusted for the number of variables that you have. R-squared can range anywhere from 0, which would mean not very predictive at all, up to 1, which would be highly or perfectly predictive. And so our value that we came up with was 0.19, so it's kind of modestly able to predict resident performance. So how well did the committee do at predicting performance? R-squared of 0.01, or essentially 0, not very well at all. Now another way you can look at the data is to plot either the committee's rank or the predicted rank from the regression model versus the resident's actual performance on the y-axis. And you can see on the left the committee's rank is pretty much a random scattered plot here. Whereas on the multiple regression side, you can sort of see a linear relationship here. The model was able to pick out the best students on the top right, and it picked out the very worst student on the bottom left, but had much more difficulty with the ones in the middle. But overall, it does seem like the multiple regression model was able to predict resident performance better.